Thanks for sticking around for the last act. Mothers and daughters and food. I suspect that with just those 5 words, mothers and daughters and food, I could stand here silently for the remainder of my allotted 5 to 7 minutes, and quite a few of you could play out a complete monologue of your own in your heads. I am a daughter and I am a mother. Food looms large in the ways I interact and in how I express myself. I satisfy my desire to nurture those I love by feeding them. And my mental scrapbook is as much a cookbook as anything else. And of course, it begins with my mother. If she were alive, my mother would have turned 95 this week. She was a pilot in World War II, an old school vagina warrior, and once I got old enough to cook my dad dinner, periodically took off to travel the world. Mom was raised by an older Swedish couple in a very loving foster home. She was not much on memories, but there was one story she told me over and over. It went this way. Mother Johnson was a good cook, but sometimes she made these very slimy Swedish balls. And I just couldn't swallow them. Failure to eat them meant going to bed without supper. Eventually, Mother Johnson believed that Mom really couldn't eat these slimy Swedish balls. Now, if she had been born in another time, my mother could have easily been a diplomat or a hostage negotiator. She was a very creative problem solver. When I was little, I was skinny, and a super picky eater. Because of the slimy Swedish balls, there was no way she was going to make me clean my plate. So, to get me to eat, she wrote the following little bedtime story for me. Once there was a little girl named Laura, who was a very picky eater. If her mom made her a sandwich, she turned up her nose and said she wanted soup. If her mom made her eggs, she pushed them away and said she wanted cereal. She just wouldn't eat, and she got skinnier and skinnier and skinnier. Finally, she got so skinny that her mom had to take her to the hospital. They put in a big, sharp intravenous needle, and they began pumping in sugar water. It hurt. One day, Laura woke up and asked the nurse very weakly and quietly if she could please have a glass of orange juice. And when Laura drank it, she thought that nothing had ever tasted so good. Then Laura asked if she could please have some scrambled eggs. And when she ate them, she thought nothing had ever tasted so good. And she began eating whatever the nurses brought her. And finally, Laura got well enough to go home, and after that, she ate whatever her mother put in front of her. As bizarre as I now find that bedtime story to be, even more bizarre was that until I told it to my kid's dad and saw the look of horror in his eyes, it had never occurred to me that there was anything odd about it. Now, please don't be misled. Mom reared me with a love of cooking and adventurous eating. She turned me loose in the kitchen at an early age, and she and the rest of the family cheerfully ate whatever I made from my Betty Crocker Boys and Girls Cookbook. When I was 13, she took me to Mexico. I know we saw and did amazing things, but the memories of that trip are all food. The violet-flavored candy at the bullfights, the self-serve bakeries, and a very fancy restaurant where my spaghetti was accompanied by a handsome waiter with a cheese grater and an actual block of Parmesan cheese. And the floating island pudding, giant puffs of meringue in a pool of creme anglaise. I thought about my mom's concern whether I was getting enough to eat when I had daughters of my own. When Nora, my gorgeous, now 5'10" daughter, first came home from the hospital, I was terrified. Would I be able to breastfeed her? Turned out I could. Would Nora nurse willingly? Turned out she would. Could I produce enough milk? And what would happen if I couldn't? On about the third day of her life, Nora was hungry and I was out of milk. She started crying because she was hungry. I started crying because I couldn't produce enough milk. Nora's dad wanted to give her a bottle and I freaked out. I knew that if we gave her a bottle, it would result in nipple rejection. And if I couldn't produce sufficient milk, wasn't I a failure as a mother and a human? If I couldn't nourish my child, fulfill my biological imperative, really, was I worth anything? Happily, more well-rested heads prevailed. Nora's dad gave her a bottle, and both Nora and I restored our equilibrium. As it turned out, Nora was a completely non-discriminatory eater. Breast, bottle, both, And my milk finally came in, and there was plenty. One of my most perfect afternoons was spent curled up in a comfy chair, breastfeeding Nora, chain-eating double-stuffed Oreos, and watching Reservoir Dogs. I have always wondered if being exposed to the Michael Madsen ear scene as a newborn helped turn Nora into the fierce, unflappable, take-no-prisoners activist that she is today. Anyway, it's all fun and games until somebody develops an eating disorder. One important point, I'm pretty sure that my girls learned the word consent before they learned please and thank you. And so let me assure you, I obtained their consent to share their stories. After hearing her fourth grade teacher talk about environmental sustainability, my oldest daughter, Candace, became a vegetarian. I won't lie, it was a pain in the ass. Her senior year in high school, she became a hardcore vegan. But food is love for me, and so we made it work. Thanksgiving, offer a cup of tea, a heating pad, and some Midol. When your daughter has an invisible scratch or scrape, you can offer a kiss. But in our body-obsessed culture, what can you safely say when your daughter is way, way too thin? So we talked about it without really talking about it. Candace was off that summer to work as a camp counselor, so we talked about coming up with a larder of vegan supplies that she could take with her. Off she went, 3 hours away by car, with her food and her lies to herself and to me. A couple of weeks into the summer, the calls started. She's ill. We're taking her for tests. She's too sick to stay. You need to come get her. We think there's more wrong than she's admitting. Home she came, and I finally had to ask. She promised me there was no eating disorder, flat out denied it. And I wanted to believe her, because what does it mean in our body-obsessed culture if you accuse somebody of having an eating disorder? Can that create body image issues? And when you're a mom who shows her love through food, how can it possibly be anything but something that you have done wrong? Diseases of the digestive system have some pretty intense names. Gastroesophageal reflux disease, ulcerative colitis, and the tests they do when you and your kid promise that she absolutely does not have an eating disorder are pretty invasive. swallow this thing from the periodic table and let me watch it irradiate your digestive tract. Open wide so I can shove something down your throat and take a little snip from your stomach lining. Watching Candace put herself through those tests, I had to believe her. Who would prefer those body invasions to fessing up to an eating disorder? I learned from a friend about a woman whose muscle memory had so completely associated bending over with throwing up that one day when she bent over to tie her shoe, she involuntarily threw up. That's what it took for that woman to accept that she had an eating disorder. At the end of the day, I faced the fact of Candace's eating disorder, and eventually she was able to say it, even to her mom. I didn't do the best job of not watching how much she ate when all I wanted to do was watch her eat. I didn't do a very good job of not looking at my watch every time she went to the bathroom. I suspect if Candace were here, she'd tell you that she knows I did my best, but that I just tried too hard. But honestly, when it's your kid, I just don't know how you can do anything else. Candace is better now, by the way. We talk about her eating disorder occasionally. She's a writer and has written about it candidly and beautifully. Is she over her eating disorder? I don't know. As a former smoker, I know how those perversely satisfying self-destructive behaviors are always just within reach. I do know that my vigilance will always be there. I celebrate through food, I comfort through food, I suffer through food. I'm a process lover, and boy, is there a lot of process in food. Maybe I'm just a girl who lives down on the bottom rung of Maslow's chart. As a Jew, the world today looks terrifyingly familiar to a past we have promised never to repeat. And I lose sleep trying to figure out what I can do about it. But the thing I come back to time and again, in good times and bad, is just wondering if everybody got enough to eat. Thank you.
All right, keep going. Keep the clapping going. One more round of applause for all of our performers. Another wonderful Memphis Monologues in the book. So a couple of items as we leave. I'd love to get a cast photo, so please, cast, if you'll come up here and join me, we'll get a picture. And please visit Christiana to check out for the silent auction. So if you placed your bid on something, head over there and give us all your money. And thank you so much for being here. Thank you. Good night.